I'm Michael Keppel, the Managing Director of Lakelet Advisory Group. I have the pleasure today of speaking with a fellow uh, expert with regards to ESOPs, Kersky Corey, who is with the SCJ Fiduciary Services. I've had the pleasure of meeting her and working with her on an ESOP, and it's going to be very advantageous to get an update on what's going on in the ESOP world. So, Chelsea, if you can just outline some of the services that you do as a trustee to ESOP and other ESOP work, and we'll have a conversation about some of the challenges and the advantages.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Michael. I really appreciate it. Some of the services that I provide as a trustee are working on transactions. So I help ESOP or companies become ESOP when they're wanting to do a new transaction. So I work on those type of transactions. I work on transactions where an ESOP company may have been a long-term ESOP company, but they decide they want to merge or sell to another company or to another type of buyer. So I work on those transactions. Sometimes, especially as ESOPs mature, the probably other type of popular ESOP transaction that a lot of trustees work on, and we certainly do, are transactions involving what we call releveraging of an ESOP. And so, in other words, you have participants departing, the company, maybe their shares are going to be paid for, and then we have to figure out what to do with those shares. And every now and then the ESOP decides to buy those shares back using a new leveraged loan. So those are probably the three most common types of transactions I work on. And then in addition to that, I manage a portfolio of ongoing clients that I work with on a day-to-day basis.
Sounds like that'll keep you busy.
I do.
One of the misnomers about the ESOPs, as I have found, is that they are extremely expensive. Now, it may be true from an front end loaded, but if you set it up properly with the right experts, the tax advantages and the other strategic advantages will outweigh it. One has to look at the big picture. And Kirsty, do you see that this front end loaded initial cost is probably the initial biggest barrier that you face when one explores performing an ESOP?
Absolutely. So the cost of doing an ESOP transaction is, depending on the size of the company, can kind of be a little bit daunting to companies who are thinking of converting to an ESOP. A lot of times, if they compare that cost to what it costs to sell to another type of buyer, those could somewhat line up. But then on the back end, as you explained, Michael, the tax advantages from being an ESOP typically far outweigh than the ongoing cost of the ESOP. Now, yes, there are costs. We have to do things like value the shares in the ESOP every year. The companies are paying for that. They're typically paying for a trustee. They're paying for record keeping work, similar to what you might do with a 401k plan, but then there's an additional requirement for record keeping and compliance testing with an ESOP plan. But again, those costs, if companies, seek out, service providers that are of quality and reasonably priced, then like you said, the tax advantages and other advantages that come along with being an ESOP can far outweigh those costs.
Yeah. In addition to just the financial benefits of performing an ESOP and exploring an ESOP, it also provides you with the exit strategy, and it allows you to take care of the employees, and the employees are the ones who got you to the promised land to be able to have a successful exit strategy. So all those tangibles and intangibles need to be taken into consideration.
That is correct.
Now, the one thing I would recommend to our listeners is that if you're going to consider an ESOP, please get an expert in ESOP. It is an extremely complicated process, and you do not get a do-over. And you're dealing with some of the IRS matters as well as Department of Labor's, and ever how you cast the ESOP, it is almost cast in stone, and it's very challenging to amend it down the road.
That is correct. That is one of the key points of when you do venture down the road of doing an ESOP transaction. You want to make sure you're aligned with the right parties that have the appropriate experience, because, like you said, Michael, it's very hard to unwind or change something once it's been done with an ESOP transaction. If almost impossible with respect to certain areas of what gets negotiated or set in stone with respect to an ESOP transaction. It's very hard to make changes after the fact.
One of the another one of the challenges I found, and I still scratch my head as to why, it is more challenging to finance an ESOP than a non-ESOP.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wondered why, because if you take a step back and look at the big picture, an ESOP has outstanding governance, which many small to mid-sized companies don't have. They are required to have an independent accredited business valuation. They have an audit. They have a trustee. They have a board of directors. There's not many small to mid-sized companies that have these guardrails in place. And yet financing ESOPs, maybe because it's just a different animal, is becoming challenging.
Yeah, I mean, we depend a lot of times on the seller to finance these ESOP deals, at least in part, if not entirely. Sometimes it's desired that the seller or the seller would like to finance the 100% of the ESOP transaction. But by the same token, you have other sellers, and depending on the structure, that need some, want to take some cash out of the equation, or maybe you're electing 1042 treatment, so there needs to be some cash involved in the transaction. I will say a lot of the companies, when they're converting to an ESOP, a handful of them certainly do already have good governance in place, but some of them haven't. So they're kind of like your small to mid-sized firms, where they're just kind of starting down that governance path. So I do think it is good for companies who are thinking about converting to ESOPs to start, thinking about what that governance, that enhanced governance looks like, and talk to ESOP experts, because they can certainly give you a preview of what is kind of expected once the ESOP is in place. And if you can go into an ESOP transaction already having kind of put that in motion, I think that's oftentimes helpful.
As our viewers know, we specialize in a host of business valuations, and ESOPs is one of these silos that we focus on. And one of the challenges in a business valuation, the objective is very important. And I'm often asked, why is the business valuation lower for an ESOP environment than a non-ESOP environment? Well, ESOPs have very strict structures with regards to discounts. ESOPs, you have to, I'm not saying you're deliberately more conservative, but the audience is different. ESOP, there's a whole host of factors that are baked into an ESOP valuation. And also the Department of Labor does have some specific rules of what they want to see with regards to forward-looking, some liabilities, etc. And those are indications as to why the valuations may be different for the audience. No, go ahead, please.
No, that's very true. When an ESOP is a buyer, I'd like to explain that the ESOP is really a passive financial investor. So when I'm, working on a transaction to buy a company into the ESOP trust, I'm not bringing my own money, so to speak, to the table, nor my own management team. I'm not going to tell the management team, I'm not going to tell them how to run the business. It's up to that current or successor management team to kind of carry the torch. I'm not paying any sort of strategic premium, or coming in there and saying, oh, I can change this, that, and the other, and create some sort of value. So an ESOP as a buyer is very much buying a company, I like to say, as is. But assuming you've got the management team and good fundamentals in place. If it's a company with no management team, or the management team is like, oh yeah, we're going to do the ESOP transaction and I'll head for the hills once we get our payout. Yeah. That doesn't make a good ESOP company. And so it's buying a company as is without paying
Well,
premiums.
you raised the important point, and I think probably the most important point is the management team.
Mhm.
I'm a strong believer, and you can get a management team, a good management team, to make widgets, and the same management team would probably be successful in hardware, software. It's the team. It's the team how they motivate people. It's the team of how they put strategic actions and execute the actions that are in place. And that's a significant barrier at times for these small and mid-sized companies. The CEO slash owner might have been his or her baby for 30 years and they want to walk away. Well, who's the number two? Have you been grooming a number two? Is there really a number two there?
Mhm.
And those things are in place because it's hard just to parachute somebody in there on day one of the ESOP. I mean, that does defeat a lot of the purposes because it's meant for the employees.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that is like the biggest, you know, obstacle, honestly, with doing an ESOP. If a lot of small companies don't have a deep bench or someone waiting in the wings, and that's okay. Because with an ESOP, the owner gets to, if they are the CEO, for instance, they get to continue to work at the company and groom those folks over time. What scares me is if you have an owner that is going to sell, but he hasn't groomed somebody to fill that slot or doesn't plan to work on doing that. That's kind of a red flag for doing an ESOP transaction. But with an ESOP transaction, there's time. So you can groom a team. You don't have to have somebody sitting on the bench waiting in the wings. You have to be working on a process to get there. And that's generally what we're looking for. And then again, going back to the comment on governance, that's why it's really important to have a board. We typically like to see some independence on the board to make sure that succession process is happening. It's being actively worked on. And we're staying on track with the goal that is kind of set out for succession. I wanted to mention one other thing is that even ESOP companies that have very successful management teams and they've been through succession. I've had companies that have done an excellent job with succession planning, but they just haven't found the right person. They think they have the right person or persons as that successor team, and it's led a few companies to actually say, this is our third time trying to find us, replacement folks, to manage the business, and we've just decided we're going to sell the company instead. And nobody wants to see that happen, but that just kind of points back to why it is so important to make sure that that's a topic at board meetings, that's something that's actively being worked on, even if you do have younger management. I mean, if we want a contingency plan, what if something unexpected happens? What's the contingency or short-term plan? So I can't say enough about how important that is.
Now, is there a period of time that if someone, an owner, changes control in an ESOP that they can stick around or should stick around?
I think it just depends. I don't think there's any timeline, honestly. If somebody stays around too long and is diverting funds away from the company to benefit themselves, now that's a red flag. We might, as a trustee, I might take issue with that. But most of the time, I'm very happy when that former seller sticks around and is there kind of shepherding the company, and maybe they want to start taking time off and just come to the board meetings or have a reduced schedule. I think that's great. I have folks that work into their 90s because that's what they do and they still add value. So I don't put a timeline on
Okay.
on how long a former owner stays.
But the mentoring or building up the bench strength is important. It's really very important in the ESOP because eventually one of the plans is to turn it over to the employees.
Yeah. So that process has to, as long as they're allowing that process to happen, and allowing for folks to come in that are that next generation that may have new ideas and it's not always just like, this is the way we've always done it, so this is how we're going to continue to do it. I think I love to see situations where the owner does stick around forever, but they're giving that next level management the freedom to maybe change some things that make the company better for the future.
As with all situations where the owner sticks around, it can be good and bad, right? then then things don't change and they do it the same old way, and he or she doesn't let go of the controls, and you have other challenges involved in it. But that happens no matter what, if they're under the umbrella of an ESOP or a
Mhm.
normal succession plan.
Yes, that's correct.
One of the other challenges when we value entities with regard to business valuations, there's been quite a few studies that uh, the multiple to value is not as high for
Mhm.
as a private equity, because as you properly stated, that with the private equity there's a premium or intrinsic economic value that they're adding, strategic changes. Okay, I can put this into a vertical integration, or I can get some synergies here, or I can use my international warehouse, etc., etc. But with an ESOP, it's as it is. There's not all those nice little premiums that are
Mhm.
private equity. And if on average, the research shows if you're getting a multiple of 10, there's a whole other things besides and business valuations besides a multiple. Don't get disappointed if your ESOP multiples about 8 or 8.25,
Yeah.
because it's just the nature of those intrinsic values. Now,
Yes.
again, it goes back to ESOP planning. That delta between the 10 in my example and 8.5, it can be more than absorbed,
Mhm.
the tax benefits, and also you really control the transition. Now, I've co-founded a very successful private equity firm, uh, and we would always pay a strategic advantage for the companies.
Mhm.
And I tell people, once the private equity firm's in there, it doesn't matter if they have 51% or 1%. Believe me, they're going to be very involved in your business.
Right.
And you want this quote strategic partner, but you got to be willing to put up with their rules and their governance. If you think an ESOP governance is tough, wait till you get a couple private equity board members in there. So, there's no pure utopia.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? If ESOP is not right for everybody, so the private equity route is, always another way to go if you have an owner that just either an ESOP isn't right for the company, or they just want to get their money and kind of head for the hill, so to speak. Maybe they're not interested in sticking around for more than a year or so. At the company, and maybe that is the best alternative for them. But yes, definitely the ESOP. The reason that most companies pick ESOP is they want to transition out over time, and they want to, their legacy is very important. And
Yeah.
most companies that do choose ESOP, they really are concerned with what's going to happen to their employees. And I think the legacy and the employee equation really kind of drive the decision making when to go down the ESOP path, and when not to.
Are there certain companies or industries that you do not believe are ready for ESOP? They're either too small or rapidly growing, a startup. Are there certain entities you would think twice about recommending an ESOP?
Yeah, I mean, some companies, are just simply too small. They can't make it work. They don't have enough employees. They don't have enough earnings. Other companies might be too new. So if they just started 2 years ago, it's probably not not the ESOP is probably not the answer. Certain technology type companies that are you know have big swings in their numbers, or maybe pouring a lot into R&D and whatever, where they don't really have a profit or something like that. They may not be um, right for an ESOP. What I found with certain technology companies is that the expectation of the employees, it's not the kind of the steady long-term growth model that an ESOP typically portrays, but it's like more like get rich quick, make things happen more quickly, and let's see quick value increase, and then we want to monetize. So depending on the goal and the strategy, again, ESOPs generally are a long-term retirement benefit plan. It's not a plan that let's put 5 years into it, grow it as quick as we can, and then see where the value is at and get out. That's not generally the equation with an ESOP.
What changes do you envision in the ESOP world? Now,
Oh,
I know everyone says that the Congress has been working on some of the tax changes with regard to ESOP for the last couple of years, but let's be realistic.
yeah.
Congress doesn't move at lightning speed, and I'm trying to be kind.
Yeah. Well, let me say first, I've been doing ESOP trustee work for I guess it's over 28 years now. And so I've seen a lot of changes in the industry, some for the better. Mostly I'd say for the better. There have been things that I've seen that I don't really um, you know, care for, both from our regulators and other just industry practices. But I think in general, ESOPs are wonderful. I think they're a way to get wealth, more widely distributed. And if you kind of look into the future, it's giving participants and people the opportunity to have something that they didn't have to, set their own money aside for. And I feel like the awareness of ESOPs is, way higher than it used to be. And so I feel like it's something that, you can ask people in general, and they're these days they're like, oh yeah, an ESOP, I've heard of that, or I used to work for an ESOP company, or I had a relative that worked for an ESOP company. When I first started in the industry, you would say ESOP and people would look at me like I had like two heads, and I would you never heard of an ESOP. So I think that the industry, we've done a very good job of getting the word out there, and I'm seeing more and more ESOP activity where companies are actually choosing to go the ESOP path. And to me, it just makes sense because it's more beneficial instead of transferring wealth from one person to one person or keeping it in a very small knit group. It's very nice to see widespread distribution and actually give people an opportunity to hopefully retire more comfortably.
Yeah, we're working with a hardware company down in Maryland, and they need to consider an ESOP. But one of the challenges, the board saying, well, why don't they just give the executives a performance stock every year instead of doing the ESOP route? For example, the chief financial officer can get 3% this year, and if we hit certain EBITDA or certain other metrics, we'll increase it. But it's a possibility, and I can see with a lot of tech companies, they're used to that, and tech companies, it's either feast or famine for them. But the disadvantage of that, as I try to explain to them, it's not that structured, and it's not cast in stone, and there's no tax benefit, and there's a lot of other things you need to take a look at. I'm not saying the same thing you're saying, Kristen. I'm not saying that the ESOP is good for all, but you at
Right.
least should explore it as a viable option and know the pros and cons.
Absolutely.
The other criticism that the ESOP say, well, it's going to take 6 to 9 months. Well, I've been doing buy and sell transactions for a few decades now, and
Mhm.
any transaction takes 6 to 9 months. If you got a private equity firm on your door today, it's
Mhm.
going to be 6 to 9 months before the check is cut and the structure and everything goes through. So I don't think that's a viable excuse.
Mhm. I agree. I mean, and if you really, I think, look at a business owner and say, well, how long have you been thinking about an ESOP? It's a long time. And maybe they've been seriously thinking about an ESOP, off and on for 5 years. And then when they decide to move forward, they've had all that time to think about it. And now, is it reasonable to think that, okay, now you're going to bring people in that don't even know your company, and you're going to be able to get a transaction done in 3 months? That's a hard pill to swallow for a trustee. I'm trying to get to know the company. I'm trying to learn as much as I can about you. Now, while I want to be efficient and get a transaction done in a timely manner, I need to make sure I understand, certain aspects of the business and other elements before kind of rushing to a close. And then, like we said earlier, it's hard to change things once you close that transaction. So doing an efficient, good transaction is more important than rushing through just to meet a deadline in my book.
Yeah, and the ESOP, the planning's the key. That's much more so than any other transaction,
Mhm.
and the private equity will offer realistically probably more money, But it's just, if you're looking for the cold money and just to run out the door, whatever, then maybe ESOP's not for you. But you got to look at the big picture and the tax benefits. If you set it up properly, the tax benefits, if someone, sit down with your accountant or your CPA, or get someone who specializes in ESOPs, and the tax benefits can be monumental. I mean, it'll really swing the thing. And it's a structured transaction.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you're exactly right. If you lay out another strategic or private equity offer next to an ESOP offer and do line up the price you're getting for the business and the tax advantages, you may be surprised at what that end result looks like.
And the other challenge is the private equity world. They'll promise you the sun and the moon, but when it goes to closing, they'll find all these adjustments and things like that. They never adjust upward. They'll adjust downward, and you'll get nickel and dime. Where the ESOP, the players already know what they're going to get and who's getting what, and that's a big change.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah, you're not really sure where you're going to stand with private equity is what I've frequently heard. But yes, with the ESOP, it's pretty much known what you're getting at time of close.
Excellent. I want to thank you so much for your insight into the ESOP world, and hopefully give some words of wisdom, and people can reach out to you. Where's the best way for potential clients or ESOP companies to reach out to you?
Well, because I have such a unique name, you could probably just Google my name and I will pop right up. You can look under SCJ Fiduciary Services, and all of my contact information, along with my colleagues' contact information, should be on our brand new refreshed website. So
I strongly recommend that you work with her and her team. You'll get some invaluable, candid assessments to ESOPs. And I want to thank you for your time today. It is greatly appreciated.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I really enjoyed our talk.
Thank you.